Okay, let's make a start on the afternoon session here at Inverness on the 4th CSA and SRA Awareness Roadshow. Now, we have a very special guest, our next speaker, Shirley P. Cooper. She is a campaigning hero, you know, of the community down where she is in Birmingham. We've had her speaking for Fresh Start Foundation already last May. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Shirley P. Cooper. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Well, I've got here. It was hard work. I don't like aeroplanes. I don't like enclosed spaces. I don't like sometimes talking about this. And every time I'm asked to speak, I have to go through all sorts of stuff before I can actually get to it. And sometimes I don't even arrive at the venue. Right? Because it's like everything starts coming back and it gets a bit much. Yeah. And then other times I'm at it all the time. It's just one of those things. Anyway, I've decided that we're going to go through the alphabet today. Right, I had to think of loads of ways. I didn't want to do a PowerPoint presentation because I've just moved house. That's another story. And I thought, right, I'm not going to have a PowerPoint. Everybody does PowerPoint. So we're going to have an interactive ABC of abuse. So I don't know how many people know their alphabet and how many people ever learned to sing their alphabets when they were kids. But the reason I'm doing the alphabet is because it reminds me of the first time I ever saw anything about sexual abuse on television as a child. And it was Perry Mason, the guy who used to do this or legal sort of programs. And it was I think it's when he actually became Ironside. I don't remember if it was in the original or whether when he was Ironside, but that's when I remember sitting in front of this program, and a girl had been sexually abused, and while she was being abused, she was actually thinking of her alphabet. Right? So it made an impact on me, really. Yeah, and it's like something that once in a while I'd have to go back into thinking of the alphabet, so that, you know, we have we talk about people soul disappearing, and, you know, people who fuse and all these sort of things that we do while we're in pain. And I think that's one of the ways I got through it, by reciting my alphabet. So whatever else was going on, all I was concentrating on was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? So we used to sing it when we were small, and I also sang the version that I learned in the Caribbean, because a lot of times in England, being abused, I talk back to the Caribbean. That was home, that was the perfect place. Nothing wrong happened to me while I lived there. Ha! I found out years later that it was all fantasy, and a lot wrong happened to me while I lived there. So it goes something like this: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, R, S, T, U, V, and V, W, X, and Y, and Z. I can sing my ABC, something like that, you know. But that's what I used to do quite often. I just walk around singing it. So, A for abuse, we know that. What do we mean by abuse? Somebody sitting in a pub, getting drunk, saying, yeah, I was abused, but it didn't affect me. And then I have to say, I'm sorry it did, because you would not be getting drunk every night after 4 o'clock like this. It did affect you. And then the stories come out, right? So we have abuse and abuse. It's not really abuse, it didn't happen, or it wasn't that bad, or he only did it once, or he was my father, so it didn't matter. I've heard it all. I don't think there's anything left to say about abuse and denial that I haven't heard now. Yeah? And there's the, well, even if he did, we're not supposed to talk about it. It doesn't happen in our community, even if it happened to me. I've heard that one as well. Yeah? So A is for apple. And we talk about giving our teachers apples, right? Everybody goes to school and they want to be favourite, and so they give the teacher an apple. Yeah, and the parents encourage it to give the teacher an apple. But my memory of apples is my godmother, who used to buy a 6-penny apple. It was 10 cents in the Caribbean. It was a Canadian apple. It was red, and no matter how many children she had around her, she chopped it up and we all had a piece. I never ever ate a whole apple till I came to England. I didn't know a child could have a whole apple, to be honest. Yeah. And my godmother was a very nice woman. She was my mother's friend. She was an older woman to my mother. My mother was abused, I found out later, by her uncle and siblings. Right? My grandfather, of course, denied it all. Yeah? And I'll tell you more about him in a minute. Right? So, A for apple. Mama gave us apples. She looked after me when before our mother died. When our mother had us, this woman was there as well. And she brought us all up. And she was always there for me, even though I'd come to another country. She was always the person at the end of my letters, at the end of my hurts and pains and everything else. She knew it all, and she documented it. She kept all of my letters, which I could refer to years later. A is also for application. I came to England at the age of 9. 4 days later, I made 10. When I came to England, I came on holiday. Lately, I'm dreading immigration knocking on the door to say you only came here for a 6-month holiday. But the 6-month holiday has lasted over 50 years, nearly 60 years. Reason why the person I came with died. And I was left with her daughter and her daughter's husband. And we came in September, and this woman died in April. And by February, March, April, May, I was actually under the care of Children's Department. And I have an issue with that, because they were supposed to be caring for children. When it became social services, I didn't really feel too bad about it, because I couldn't understand what this social services was about. But in the beginning, Care of Children Department, I reckon, should have been caring for children. But they didn't. They definitely didn't care for me. Right? The fact that I'm alive today has nothing to do with those people. It's because I am bloody-minded, determined, and anytime you tell me no, I say yes. Right? And I've been like that since I was about 3 years old, and I'll tell you the reason behind that as well. So I had an application put in by this woman to say that she wanted to keep me. And I remember hearing the conversation. Her mother had died. It would look bad if she let me go. But I've got my notes. And thank God I could read before I came to England. And my notes actually says 35 pages in handwriting, 35 pages in type, which says exactly the same thing. I was kept in England by this Care of Children Department to live in this house with this family. The man and his wife had 6 children. There were 3 or 4 families living in the same house. He was abusive anyway. That's why I came to England with her mother, because he was abusive towards her. He was a womanizer, you know, tall, dark, handsome, literally. Had loads of women, beat her up. She was financially deprived of just about everything. He just wouldn't give her any money to bring up the children, because there were all sorts of reasons which he used to abuse me years later. Days later, not even years. So he now is in the house working. She is in the house working. They apply to Care of Children Department because everybody's told them if you keep her, you'll get money for her. And I remember the conversation. I came across my records a few years ago, and on my records, on nearly every page, reason for this child being under care, The family was large, couldn't afford to look after their children, therefore if Shirley stays with them, we can give them money to look after their children. Now to me that means selling a child. They were leaving me so that they can give them what's the equivalent of £450 a week now to look after their children. Yeah? So the social worker came to visit. And as she walked through the door, this man is sitting in the room. I am sitting on his lap. There are loads of children around. The house was full of children apparently. I'm sitting on his lap. So she tries to have an interview with him. And in the process, she says to him, "You're going to have to have a medical in order to see if you're suitable." To which he starts unbuttoning and says, "Do you want to do it now?" Now that should have rang some bells, but it didn't. So they left me there. And by this time, it's February, March, April. I have already lost somebody. By this time, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but by this time, they'd already drugged me up. On the day of the funeral, I actually got home. Remember, I'm just 10 years old now. I've only been in England a few months. The person I came with fell down the steps in November, broke her leg. So we'd only been here a couple of months before she broke her leg, so she was housebound, bedridden. Then she goes into hospital for a few days, dies of pneumonia. Nobody's telling me anything. I was in a purple summer dress, but it's February. Purple summer dress, short sleeves, pleated skirt, and I stood at this graveyard and nobody said boo to me. Nobody explained anything. So I got back to the house. I'm in this house with these strangers. I already knew they didn't want me there. And I turned on the radio and there was a song that I liked, so I started dancing. And the daughter walks in and says, "We've just buried my mother and you're here dancing," and then started telling me it was my fault, all the trouble I'd given her before. Alright? So don't expect that I don't know what you did and what you didn't do, blah, blah, blah. So I responded by screaming the place down and smashing everything around me. So this doctor is sent for, and he's like Miss Polly with the dolly, the doctor came with his hat and his cane and his bag, and he's very big. I'm a little black child lying in a bed, and this 6-foot giant of a white man stands next to me. I'd never been near a white man before other than the milkman. And then he couldn't do anything, so he sent for the second one. And he couldn't do anything, so he sent for the third one. So 3 doctors later, little child in bed, 3 white, 7-foot, 6-foot, 9-foot, whatever they were bigger than me, I felt they were giants, actually came in. And the decision was, she needs to be medicated. She needs to be tranquilized to stop her. So that was the beginning of me being tranquilized. And while this was happening, of course, he had access to me. Now, I denied that for years. It just didn't figure that this man could have done this at that time. I knew exactly when he started, I thought. Right? So that's A for application. I don't know how long I was off school, but I then went back to school and I sat in a corner with all these other kids who were learning to read and write because I was far ahead of them. And when it came to the 11 plus, other people passed, I didn't. Well, basically, looking back now, the white children went to the grammar school, the Asian kids went to the new secondary modern, and the African Caribbean, who we were West Indian at the time, went to Prosville, we called it. It was Roseville School in Leeds, and most girls went there, and by the age of 14, 15, they were pregnant, and we called it Prosville. Now, looking back, a lot of those girls were actually sexually abused at home and by friends, family, whatever else, yeah, because talking to them nowadays, I'm getting their stories. So, our application to go to a grammar school came from me. They weren't interested in my education by this time. They didn't like the idea that I might need to go to a grammar school because their children learnt English as a second language, and in those days, those kids were in special schools. So I go off to this grammar school now, and because I was very bright, I learned to do a lot of things, right? I was very bright, I was top of the class. Nobody came to parents' evening, anything like that. Nobody was interested. I was just there for the money. So, A is also for awareness. I was already sexually aware. I'd already been abused by the time I came to England. I didn't remember that, but I was. Right? I'd had some terrible experiences, which I'll tell you about as we go along. So there's this thou shalt not be aware. There's actually a book called that, where basically it's one thing knowing you've been abused, but it's another thing wanting to tell everybody else about it. It is just not allowed. And you get called all the liars and the cheats and all the names they can think of to discredit whatever you've got to say anyway. So, they applied, and they got me. And they had a little son called Brian, who was 4 years old when I first came to England, and that was the reason, one of the reasons I came to England. In those days, it was very difficult to get babysitters, and they used to do some horrific things, so that the first report about childcare in Britain was actually done in Leeds, and it was called Who Cares? And Brian was one of the kids affected because he was taken to a childminder who tied children to beds and table legs and, you know, left chemicals out for them, and he actually drank a load of bleach. So this woman wrote back to her mother and said, can you come to England? The mother was used to going to Aruba, Dutch island, to see her anyway, when her husband was being awful to her and that, and she used to leave me behind. But when she wanted to come to England, she said, I've got to bring Shirley with me, and they said, no, we've got enough mouths to feed, we don't want her. But in the end she won, and it was like, we're coming for 6 months, right? And she got here and decided she didn't like the way her children, her child and grandchildren behaved, and we were going to move out. But like I said, she died beforehand. So her son was called Brian, and the reason I remember Brian, his name was Brian Cuffey, right? And the reason why I'm remembering Brian is because, as somebody was talking about earlier, last year, January, we actually had Brian Cranston locked up for child sex abuse in a children's home. And I remember Brian Cranston's name because Brian was my cousin and Cranston was the name of the person who brought me to England. So I've always remembered this man. And in 1974, I reported this guy in Oak Hill House Children's Home. And the staff said, it's all right for you, you're going back to your posh university, after that we've got to live with it. I was scared of that man. 1974, I was just out of my teens. I didn't feel right next to him. I was scared when I had to stay over in that home, and I didn't know exactly why, but I just didn't feel right. And I was only working there part-time. One night, my fears were realised when I heard a noise outside the door, and I looked, and there is Mr. Cranston down the corridor. I was on the girls' side, and he is literally by one of the girls' rooms. So I waited for him to come back up, and I asked why, and he said he found her on the boys' side. And I said, well, even if you did, I'm on duty tonight with whoever else was on duty. Why didn't you just knock on the door and tell me that you found her over there? What are you doing coming out of her room? Well, it transpired that he was sexually abusing her as well as other girls in the home. So when they locked him up last year, it was all over the newspapers. Have we done well? It's historical abuse. Brian Cranston, age 90-odd, has now been put in prison for sexually abusing children in 1980s. So straight away I'm saying to everybody, hold on, I reported him in 1974. I wrote a thesis for my teaching certificate. It was actually called How the Basic Needs of a Child Are Met in the Care System. And one of the basic needs is to care for attention and love and whatever, yeah? And so when I wrote this thesis, I actually got to the part about how they got love, how they got attention. And I wrote about Brian Cranston sexually abusing girls, because they were all telling me. I wrote about the fact that 12-year-old girls were put on the pill to stop them getting pregnant in this home. I wrote about Brian Thornton, who had killed a woman at Pipe Hayes, a nurse at Pipe Hayes a children's home. And he, again, got locked up and he was thrown out on some technicality. And he turned up in Brent as a housing officer, senior housing officer. Yeah? So Brian Cranston is still in prison for some of the crimes he committed at Oak Hill House. None of the other people from Oak Hill House have gone to jail, but there were loads of them. Right? There were loads of them, and I know what happened to some of those kids, right? Because they used to talk about it. I remember one girl saying her father was bad. She preferred to be at home with her father, where when he needed a drink, he gave her to his friends. But being in that home was worse. That's what she told me. She disappeared one weekend, came back, covered head to toe in what looked like bites. And they were all, oh, she must have gone off somewhere and some guy must have got her and whatever. And all this time I'm thinking, oh yeah, you to try another one. Yeah? Jessie, her name was. She and another little boy were sitting at breakfast one morning, and I heard the little boy say to her, I know where you went over the weekend, don't I? I know what you're doing, I know who did it to you. So I'm hearing all this stuff, and it's like, oh my God, oh my God. And I went to a senior member of staff, probably the same Brian Cranston, and I said, I'm concerned, I've just heard this at breakfast. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it, you know, they all tell lies. You know, that's why they're here, they're all liars. Right? So, that's Brian. Now, breasts. Me for breasts. My foster father groomed me. He started off when just round about November the 15th. I know we had a bonfire, and he used to sit on the settee next to me, and he started off with putting his hands up my clothes. And he worked from there over the years. It just got more and more and more. And I was flat-chested, you know, everybody else was maturing, I wasn't maturing. But it got to the stage where he felt it was time that he saw whatever little titties I had. I remember him putting it like that, you know, and there's no way he was going to touch me. I mean, it's bad enough what else he was doing, but to go taking off my clothes for him as well, he can forget that one. But he had a lot to say about it. He was always going on about it, how they're growing nicely and everything else, you know. And I hear that everywhere I go. I'm in places and I hear men saying to little girls, oh, you're getting big now, or your titties are growing now, or whatever else. And everybody else laughs. It's funny, listen to how he's talking. Don't talk to the girl like that. But it's a joke to them. And it's not a joke when you're developing and somebody's going on about your chest all the time. Right? Beauty. He kept telling me how beautiful I was. Right? Oh, aren't you beautiful? Oh, your eyes are beautiful. Oh, your lips are beautiful. Oh. So, when I started getting acne as a teenager, I actually went out of my way not to be beautiful. And one way not to be beautiful is for them not having to look at you. So how do they not look at me? I've got a spot, scratch the hell out of it. I literally walked around with spots bleeding. And when there's a scab, it was another reason to go pulling it off. And I found a big word today that describes all this as a mental illness and whatever. Doom or something, I'll come to it when I come to D. So I started scratching up my face, and then when people started telling me not to, when people started hitting me on my hand, I started scratching my arms. You could still see some of the scars. And when they started going on about that, I started scratching my chest. Right? I'd stick my hand down my clothes and start scratching. And I remember at school one day, I looked down at my blouse, and it literally had little red spots all around it where I'd been scratching. Yeah? And for some reason, I went to a posh grammar school where everybody was immaculate, but nobody seemed to notice that my white blouse was red and white. Nobody cared. And I found all the forms that the school filled in, and they're a pack of lies. I was well dressed, I well kept, or whatever. My hair wasn't combed half the time. Nobody in the house could comb my hair. I had to comb it myself. Right? And she combed everybody else's hair. She wouldn't comb mine. She wouldn't plait my hair. I had to find somebody else to do it. And then they wanted to know why, because she was a hairdresser. Yeah? So I've got dirty clothes on. If I wanted clean clothes, I had to wash them and put them back on. There was no washing and leaving them, because her kids would then wear them. So if I wanted especially clean underwear, they had to go back on. Yeah? And boots. She bought me a pair of boots for the winter, and she bought them too big because I was going to grow into them. So when it snowed, the snow just went straight down the boots. I was walking around with feet slopping all over the place. Yeah, I wore big heavy boots. I had a very long coat because I was going to grow into it. I didn't grow. I didn't look good. And that's why for years after I left school and I could buy my own clothes and everything, if somebody said to me it looked nice, straight away I thought, oh my God, I don't want to look nice. I don't want anybody to tell me I look nice. Yeah? This fear that I carried for years of standing out, looking nice, being beautiful, I just couldn't cope with it because that was the prelude to something else most of the time. So, beast, he was. He was a beast. He was a nice guy. He was a tall, dark, handsome guy. He spoke French, German, Dutch, Spanish. Right? He was an intellectual. I found him on the internet the other day. He used to work for a Dutch oil company. Yeah? But behind all that, he was a nasty piece of work. He sexually abused all of his children. I'm even sure he sexually abused his son. And every little girl that came into our house got abused by him. Every one. One of them got abused by Jimmy Savile. And that's why for years I kept saying to somebody, I don't like that man, there's something about him I don't like, but I couldn't remember everything. And I had a letter from Jimmy Savile. Well, it seems as if the powers that be that don't want us to talk has actually got that letter now. Because when I was moving house, I gave somebody the keys and I said, bring everything. There's a suitcase on top of my wardrobe, can you bring it? When he finally brought it, it was open. And the things that I knew I had in there were not there, including Jimmy Savile's letter that he wrote to me in the 70s when I was at college. I invited Jimmy Savile to come and see my class of disabled children. It was a special needs class. And I, because he was so nice, forgetting what he'd done to my friend, I invited him to come to our school. He wrote me a letter which I didn't like. I really didn't. There was something in that letter that I felt was not right. He was not supposed to write things like that. So I took it to my senior lecturer, who said, tear it up, throw it away and don't talk about it. Well, of course, I ignored her and I put it in my suitcase. And then I wrote him back and told him what I thought of him, which was full of swear words and everything else, because I really did think at that time that he was nasty, no matter what anybody else had said. I don't know if I've had personal experience with him, right? Because sometimes I do find out sometime later that, yeah, suddenly I have a flashback and I remember the incident. But I know definitely the second letter he wrote me, I didn't like either, and I put that in the suitcase. And they've always been there as far as I know, but somehow they seem to have disappeared. And the suitcase was open, because that's what my friend said. When he went to look at the, to get the suitcase down, it was open, and I know I never left that suitcase open. It was never open. That was the only thing I had that I brought from the Caribbean that was still mine, that was still intact. It was broken at one time when my cousin wanted to get in it or something, and I actually got the lock for it. But somehow it's disappeared. Like a lot of other evidence that some of us have had, that disappears. Yeah? Books. I've got 3,000 now. And if it wasn't for books, that's no reason that I wouldn't have survived. Books, you know, Great Expectations, Jane Eyre, Cinderella, all the English classics. What do they include? Being in England, Heidi wasn't from England, but I used to think Heidi was written in England. But all those stories are about children being abused. Before I came to England, I'd got it in my head that if you're in England, you're poor or orphaned, you're going to be treated badly. And that is a positive negative, because expecting to be treated badly, when I was treated badly as an orphan, I felt that this is England and this is what happens. They abuse poor children and they abuse orphans. I already knew that before I got here, so when people were ill-treating me, I didn't think anything of it. You know, I just thought this is normal, this is expected, this is acceptable. I might not like it, but that's how they behave in England. Yeah. So, brick wall. That's what we get. Every time we try to open our mouths, we hit a brick wall. It might not be a physical one, but when I was younger, yes, I did get thrown against brick walls as well. But we hit an invisible brick wall. We try to tell somebody who don't want to hear. I remember trying to tell my uncle a few years ago when he came to England on holiday, and I'm sitting there and I'm pouring my heart out because I hadn't had this sort of conversation with the elders in the family before. And then suddenly he looks out the window and says, "Oh, look, the sun's going in." And I thought, did I say anything just now? Was I actually pouring my heart out just now? Because he wasn't interested, he wasn't listening to me. Right? And this is the one uncle that I can't tell anybody has ever abused me, but even he wasn't going to listen to me. So, after that, we had the carrot, which a lot of us are getting. I've been offered this carrot so often since I've started speaking out. Somebody comes along, we get a group together, and we're going to talk about being abused. And everything's going, and somebody comes and they offer us some funding. And everybody went off because somebody's offered them some money. And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't want it." And they're like, "Oh, Shirley." And even the education department one time, I actually complained, and it was to do with abuse in school as well. And they knew that I was making a lot of noise about a lot of things. So they appeared with a pile of application forms, filled in with all my details, except for my signature, and said, "Choose whatever you want, and it's yours." And I'm like, "Sorry, I don't want it." "Oh, come on, Shirley, play the game." Well, I don't play anybody's game. I don't play anybody's game. I play my game, my way, whether you like it or not. And I will take my ball and go home if I have to. Right? And they didn't like it. And one of them said to me, "What do we have to do to you to make it fine?" And I said, "I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do." I said, "The most you can do is kill me. And, you know, it's physically dead. That's the only thing you're going to do, because if you want to kill my hopes and my dreams and my aspirations and whatever else, well, hey, join the queue. I've had that all my life, so hey, you know, that's not going to make any difference to me." Right? And I said, "I suppose now I will never get a senior position in Birmingham." And the guy said, "You're damn right you won't." I said, "But you know what? My soul will still be intact. No matter who you pay off, who you get to stop me, my soul will still be intact." And that's what's kept me going. Yeah? Coat. I wore my pink coat today, and I'll show you my pink coat. Do you remember in the 60s, you remember Shaft? All these guys walked around, you know, in their big leather coats. Yeah, walking down the street in their big leather coats. Little vulnerable me walking down the road, and these guys in these leather coats are like, "Hey, you know, come here. I hear you talking." Or maybe I just had vulnerable in big letters on my forehead, right? Because they find you. When I first started, in fact, before I started college, I was already aware of them because I lived in an area where it was red light, right? I walked the streets all hours of the night. It was safer outside than it was inside. So I didn't care what time it was, I walked. When we were having a cup of tea earlier, I looked out the window and I actually said to somebody, "You see that playground? I'm going to take a photograph." Because I spent a lot of time in the park. I slept on the slide. I tried everything in the park, and the slide was the best place to sleep because I couldn't fall off. And I stayed there overnight. I told my ex-boyfriend a couple of years ago, right, we hadn't talked for years, and then he was ill, so I decided to go and visit him. He'd had a stroke, and for 5 years nothing was working. So I thought, right, I'm part of the reason this is happening. Right, it's all that was in his head, the guilt and everything else about what he could have done for me and didn't do, and what, you know, the horrible things he did to me. And I actually told him I slept in the park, and he says, "But I used to walk you home." I says, "Yes." You walked me home, put the key in the door, stood behind the door, gave you 10 minutes to get off the street, and then I slipped down to the park. And I slept in the flower beds. I knew every flower in that flower bed in Leeds, in Potter Newton Park. I go there every summer for the carnival, and I go around the flower beds, and I go around the play area just to remind myself that that's where I used to be, and that's where I am now. Yeah. I went to Carper Street School. They could never get my name right. My surname is Cooper. It was pronounced Cooper. My teacher kept telling me, in this country, everything we got in this country, right? My primary teachers could not see anything wrong. I can't believe that I went to a school every day and nobody noticed that I was different, that I was sleeping on my desk, crying all the time. I was leaving notes, I was writing things because I kept being told, don't tell anybody. Nobody ever said to me, do not write down what I'm doing to you. So, I didn't tell anybody, verbally, but there were signs all over my exercise books, all over the desks, but they didn't notice. Right? We had a coal fire in our house. She taught me how to light it, but I couldn't sit in front of it. I was always cold, hence the coat, the cardigan and the jumper, because this morning I got dressed to come here, you know, it's like, hey, and I looked at the sun and I thought, yeah, it'll soon be cold again.
We thought that was a typical Highland weather.
I know. So I always wear layers, I always wear loads of clothes, because when I was younger I didn't have clothes, I didn't have warm clothes. Like I said, I went to this funeral in midwinter, you know, dressed for a Caribbean summer. So we had this coal fire, and she and her children sat on the settee in front, and there was a table behind, and I sat at that table. And I did my homework there. I was always cold, I was always shivering, I was hunched back because I couldn't stand the cold, I was badly dressed for the winter. The social worker, one of them, in her notes, actually wrote something about me being inappropriately dressed, but when she came to visit, although it was cold and I was in a summer dress, I had a cardigan on. Hey, yeah. C for come, as in ejaculation. Cannot talk about sex abuse without that. I have a problem with white things. Yeah, and a lot of kids do. A lot of kids do. And people don't notice. Yeah, a child would sit there telling you they don't like cream. They don't like they don't like rice pudding. They don't like even mashed potato because it's white. And straight away everybody else is thinking something else. Well, one of the reasons why is because that child is being abused and this man is ejaculating in them, on them, round them, whatever, right? And I used to have a lot of problems with that. I've learned to overcome it. You know, sometimes you stand in front of your fear and you say, right, I'm not going to let this stop me. And I've had to work on that one, yeah? I like to sew, thank God, because other than that I won't get any clothes. She got a clothes allowance for me every 3 months. And I knew when it came because every week she sent me to get the money. So every week I knew how much money she was getting. And whenever the clothes money came, she didn't send me to change it. She gave one of her kids, or she took it herself. But her kids got new clothes, and I got their cast off. Social worker never noticed that I didn't always have new clothes. Yeah. And in fact, what used to happen, she used to get an allowance for me, and sometimes she didn't give me whatever she was supposed to give me. So she didn't give me the bus fare that was included in the money. She didn't give me the dinner money that was included in the money. She didn't give me money for sanitary towels, which was included in the money. So I remember having to think, I had £0.5 pocket money, and I had to think, do I pay for my dinner, sanitary towels, or bus fare today? Because I could pay for all three. Yet she got the money to keep me every single week. In my notes, I've actually found where she's written to them to say, the money didn't come, couldn't she have it because she needs it? And then a few days later, she writes another letter to say, oh, she found it behind the piano. No, she didn't. I actually confronted her about the fact that the Saturday before she'd given me to go and change. Every week I had to put some money down for savings. And it's only lately I've realised that when I left the house I didn't bring the savings book with me. So we get to D. Darling. This man always called me darling. Always called me darling. I didn't like being called darling, even now. You look on Facebook and you'll see where I tell people, don't call me darling. Don't want to be called darling, don't call me Jill. Right? I learned to sew and I made the first Shirley P in Leeds. One of these sort of things, African things. I'd gone to London, a friend had given me the pattern and I made one, and I felt really good that I could make it and everything. And then I had my hair cut and I had an Angela Davis look, big afro, and he made me a comb. Yeah. And then he did what most people do when they give you presents when you're young and vulnerable. Sexually abused me. His brother and his friend held me down, and this time I was under 18, so still a child being abused. And this was in an organisation that was there to deal with all the hurts and pains in community. Yeah. Dreams. Well, a lot of times I don't have dreams because I don't sleep. I have nightmares. I have flashbacks. I have all sorts of stuff. I don't necessarily plan them. I don't necessarily know when they're going to happen. I did dream once that my foster parents told me that they abused me so that I can actually grow up and help other people who are being abused. So in this dream I say to them, well, you didn't have to do it like that. And they said, well, they had to do it anyway. Well, yeah, they had every excuse to do whatever they did. I used to dream about being back in the Caribbean. Everything was going to be great in the Caribbean, you know, the sun, the sea, everybody loved me, everybody looked after me. And then I read the book, The Unbelonging, and I realized that, yeah, I was there too. In The Unbelonging, this child gets sexually abused, and she dreams about being back home, and she goes back home and things aren't as she expected. And that actually happened to me. I went back to the Caribbean only to find out my younger sister was being abused by my uncle. And I didn't know why I reacted the way I reacted at the time. I was just annoyed that he was doing this to my younger sister. And everybody knew about it and nobody did anything. And my elder sister felt it was okay because she was living somewhere and our cousin was looking after her. Her cousin who got money from me all the time for my younger sister. My uncle is a big name, still a big name. The government house in St. Kitts belongs to my family. So the actual St. Kitts government have a house rented from my grandfather, who every time they wanted to do anything at all, would go out to his house and talk to him about it. So he's dead now, but his son is a housing agent. And he will only rent you a house if, one, you'll have sex with him, two, if you'd let him have sex with your child. He is still there. That's one reason why I keep saying I don't like aeroplanes. Because I know the next time I get on an aeroplane to go on a long haul, it's going to be to kill him. I've tried twice, I've failed twice. First time I threw a brick at him when I went home on holiday, because he suggested that we carried on the way he left off. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but I just felt somewhere in my head I must have known. So I threw a brick at him and it missed. And the second time we were at my grandfather's house and he suggested again, and I put my foot in his back and he fell down the stairs. My grandfather disinherited me, but hey, as I said to him, I've been looking after myself since I was 10 years old, so I didn't need his money. But the guy is still there sexually abusing. Somebody I told years ago told me it wasn't true, I'm always making up these stories. She went back there to live, and when she came back on holiday, she said, God, Shirley, you told me it was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. And yes, your uncle is still telling everybody, bring me your daughter and you can have somewhere to live. Yeah? So I dreamt about being protected back home, and you know, everything was rosy before I came here, yeah. And the new illness I've come across today is dermatillomania something. Excoriation disorder, which is the digging up the skin and pulling all the scabs off. And what they did to me for that, my doctor gave me Betnovate, Dermovate, and everything that had Vate written at the end. Instead of trying to find why I was digging up my spots, he just gave me creams, which they had to take off the market eventually because they found a carcinogenous. E for elephant in the room, that's me. We all know what an elephant in the room is, don't we? And elephant jokes. This guy used to tell me dirty jokes. I knew some really nasty, horrible, dirty jokes when I was a child, and I'm on about between the ages of 10 and whatever. And I'm not talking about over 18 now. Right? He told me all sorts of jokes to, I don't know, get me involved. He gave me dirty books to read, he showed me dirty photographs. His daughter worked for Kodak Duns, because her ex-boyfriend gave me the name of the firm last year after he'd read my book. He said, she worked at Duns. She worked at Duns, and all the dirty photos had to be handed in by the staff to the management, because her father must have been showing her dirty pictures, I'm sure. She brought home the pictures, and he had them on his dressing table to show me. Right, so I lived at number 11. I used to think he abused me when I was 14. And one day I was telling somebody earlier, I was looking at all the photos. I thought, oh, this abuse thing, I mean, come on, it must have started sometime. I keep thinking it started when I was this age, and then one day I think, nah, it started before that, it started before that. So one day I got a load of photos of me as a child, put them at the side of the computer, and started writing about each picture. And I came across a picture of me in a green dress. And on that, in that picture, I'm standing by number 11A, which was the number of our house. And it suddenly occurred to me that I was abused in that dress when I was 11. And I was like, no, I couldn't have been that young. But in the end, I had to accept that I was 11. And he had taken advantage. I had a nice dress on. It was the usual, hey, you're beautiful, this dress is nice. Oh, yeah. Right, E for epidemic. If child sex abuse was an epidemic, they'd have been curing and treating. It would be national headlines. It would be, we don't need this. I'm sure there are more cases of child sex abuse than there are of German measles, even domestic violence, which they're talking about at the moment. Yeah?
Perhaps I might want to go on to say that it might be endemic rather than epidemic.
Endemic? It's pandemic.
Pandemic.
It's pandemic. It is universal.
Yes.
You know, we were talking earlier about this sort of typical abuser. We've gone from the stranger danger, the old man on the street, the lonely old man, and we've had the Irish guy who comes home, beats his wife and fucks his children. And we've had the Muslims who, of course they do it, we all know they do it, that's why the women wear veils so that we can't see all the scars. But what we won't have for a long time is, it could be you, or you, or you, or you, this one's father, or what. I used to walk into classrooms, look at 30 children and think, oh Lord my God, at least 1/5 of the girls, 1/7 of the boys are being sexually abused right now, or has been. And it was like, hard. But try going to a head teacher to tell them that you suspect the child's being abused. Try going in and telling them that a child is disrupting all your lessons because they want to talk about their abuse. And if they can't come and tell you while you're sitting at your desk, they will put their hand up from the back of the room in the middle of a maths lesson and tell you, Miss, last night my dad. And I'm like, hey, put your hand down. Talk to me in a minute. And you go and tell the head and you think, it's going to be sorted. And then years later you find the bloody head is a child sex abuser anyway. Yeah, which I have found loads of them. Alright. F for Francis. My sister is called Frances Garandi. She is a preacher. She says, I've got an unforgiving spirit. Right? Because her husband is a preacher and he's a rapist. And so what remember the trouble I had last year getting to Perth? She decided 5 minutes before I was due to go on the radio, on the program, that she wanted to go to Morrison's to do some shopping. because she did not want me to talk about it on the radio. She did not want me to go to Perth. After her son was supposed to come up with me, he was going to drive me up. Then he decided he couldn't drive up, he'll come with me on the train, and at the last minute, literally, he said he wasn't coming. I'd already booked the hotel. I just hadn't paid for the fare yet. Right? He decided he could come because she got to him. Since I put this advert on Facebook and everywhere else that I am, my sister has not said a word. She's phoned me a few times, but I don't want to hear, don't do it. So I ignored her phone calls. I said, text me. And I know she won't write it. Alright? She was abused before me. She was abused by everybody else I talk about. But she will not say it. But when we're together, I can still see all the signs. She's awake by 5 o'clock every morning. Her husband's an abuser, she knows he is. Last summer, I told my nephews that their father's a rapist. And it's like, oh, yeah, Shirley is depressed, don't listen to everything she says. Yeah, but they will find out if they haven't found out yet.
If I may come in just for 2 seconds, yeah. Now, you've been told that you have an unforgiving spirit.
Yeah.
And these are by supposed preachers. Now, we've already had another talker in here who said that his child has been abused in a Church of Scotland home. Right? Now, let's go back to... Now, I'm not trying to Bible bash everybody here, right? But the Bible says very clearly in it, better a millstone put round the neck of the person and dropped in the deepest ocean than have to face God for making one of my little ones stumble. Yep. Now, so we are looking, God will forgive and we can have a forgiving spirit. But the Bible talks about repentance, and that means living that you're sorry.
And it also says, thou shalt not kill.
Exactly.
And when you sexually abuse somebody, you
kill
them. You kill their spirit, their aspirations,
yes,
their hopes, everything.
Everything.
You kill them.
The forgiveness thing comes with, not on its own, it comes with certain requirements.
Yes.
And one of the requirements is for someone to
repent
and ask for forgiveness.
Yes.
And I don't see the queue of people asking for forgiveness.
Well, I've said, I will forgive when you are locked up in prison and I come to visit you. That's when I'll forgive.
Yeah.
I am not going to forgive you to carry on sexually abusing everybody and pretending it hasn't happened, because one day he'll have to answer to God. He has to answer to man as well. The Bible also says, obey the law of the land. And the law of the land says you cannot have sex with under 16s.
I agree.
Right? And it says you can't have sex with somebody who don't want you.
Yes.
You cannot have sex with your your wife's sister.
Exactly.
Yeah, you cannot have sex with your grandmother. You know, there's a long list. Leviticus tells us who we can have sex with.
Yes.
And the law tells us who we can have sex with.
Yes.
And the law is Judeo-Christian, and it's, you know, it's actually what's in the Bible, right? It's in all the Old Testament, in the New Testament, it's all there. And it also says not to hurt anybody.
Yes.
And common law of this land says do not hurt anybody or anything.
And love thy neighbour
as yourself. And you're not going to hurt yourself, so why do you want to go and hurt anybody else or another child?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yes.
Yeah, you're saying.
Can I ask you, why do you believe the stuff is wrong in the Bible?
Why did I suffer?
No, why do you believe?
Why do I believe I suffer?
I've never believed anything has been wrong in the Bible anyway.
I think one of the reasons, in a way, is because somewhere along the line, somebody knew that I was going to speak out. Somewhere, you know, sometimes they talk about it all being preordained. Before we come here, it's all sort of worked out.
See, but the majority of people in this country that I see that have been arrested and brought up from the abuse of children are the people who use the Bible. It's a crazy situation that we live in a Bible that's supposedly controlling people.
Well, the devil used the Bible to get Eve to sin in the first place, did he not?
The devil believes in God too. That's something I need to remind people. We say we believe in God, the devil believes in God too. He knows everything there is to know. But I also have cases that I've come across of men sexually abusing their child while their Bible's open.
Yeah.
Reading them the bit in the Bible about who was it whose daughter got him drunk and raped him?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
It was men who wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's men who run the churches in their various forms.
Yeah.
Men are weak, men fall. Some get back up, some don't.
Yeah.
But that is not God.
But there are also some men that I've come across, like my foster father, who was not weak. He tried to tell me that. You know, he'd like, be sorry. Oh, Shirley, I didn't want to do that. Come, he used to say, come, let's us two unwanted get together, because his wife was rejecting it. He told me all about their sex life, how she only wanted sex to have a son. She wasn't interested in him, so she had 5 daughters and then the son. And that was his reason for turning to other people. At the same time, this man had a girlfriend called Sheila. But that didn't stop him sexually abusing us. His daughter, who he sexually abused, died last year, January. And God will have to come and tell me that she did commit suicide, because she said in her book that I was a liar. She actually bought my book, read it, wrote a book which contradicted everything I wrote, and decided she was going to get a solicitor to sue me for telling lies, but didn't bother. She was found last year, January, just after her birthday, with the 2 books at the side of her bones. Her body had deteriorated, and the 2 books were literally next to her. Whatever happened to her just after Christmas, just before her birthday, January the 5th, or just after her birthday, led her to put the 2 books together. And to me, that was a clue. That was saying to the rest of the world, Shirley was right. It did happen. I looked out of my bedroom window this morning and I saw 2 skylights. And I remembered, and my cousin wrote that in her book and I hadn't written it before. He came into the room one night and he thought she was sleeping. So he started to abuse me. She woke up, so he quickly pushed the skylight up and rushed out of the room. So she was like, oh, who's opened the skylight? Somebody's coming in, somebody's coming in. That man phoned the police to say that somebody had tried to get into the room to his daughters. The police turned up, looked at the skylight, and he's giving them this fantastic story. The 2 of us are just like too scared to say anything, and he tells them how somebody is trying to get in. So the police went outside, couldn't see any evidence of anybody, and I don't think they believed him actually, because I remember one of them saying, it's been raining, there is no way anybody could be climbing on the roof. But they never did anything. But she had that in her book last year. She wrote about it. She wrote about it, right? And she died. And I'm sure she committed suicide. She couldn't take it anymore. Her book began with her saying, a man comes into her room and says, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. That's what her father always said when he came in. We protected each other. We didn't talk about it, but we protected each other. If we heard him coming, one of us went in the wardrobe, the other one stayed out. And then we just didn't talk about whatever we heard. But we did that for years. But his wife still wanted to pretend that nothing happened. Yeah? So, we talked about it earlier, fertility. Fertility. I used to crochet. I know that man got me pregnant. I know that man performed some sort of operation on me when I was a child. Right? I was under 18. I know he did. I just don't want to think about it too often. Right? But I know he did.
So did you say an operation?
Yeah, it is an operation. You have to put a child down and stick something on her to get out whatever you put in there, yes.
Abortion, you're saying?
Yeah, I know he did it. We had a guy who used to come around with a suitcase to fix things. The first time I saw him, I thought he came to fix the telly. I showed him in the room with the telly, and he didn't come to fix the telly. he'd come to fix one of the daughters. Well, I was disgusted. 1972, there were more children born in Leeds, Chaptertown, than the years before, because the main abortionist went to prison. The old woman who they all used to take these kids to when they got them pregnant was actually imprisoned. 1972, summer. I know that. Right, what time is it? Yeah, around that. Okay, so I did the whole alphabet. I did the whole alphabet because I got pregnant. Whether or not anything happened before, whether or not it was an abortion, the fact is, in May 1972, I was pregnant and lost a baby. And I could not tell you whether it was my boyfriend's or my foster father. I think, I'm thinking about it often, I think it was the foster father. His wife, according to what she told my sister, and my sister came back from Africa, his wife reckoned anything that happened was children growing up. And I said to my sister, I'm not talking about what the children did to me, because the children did actually hold me down one time. My cousins held me down so that their brother could rape me. Yeah? And he was only young, he was younger than me, but they actually called him over, right, stripped me, had me laying down, put him on top of me, right? But in May 1972, when I couldn't take it anymore, because like I said, he was grooming me, so he started with just little things, you know, a little bit more each time, a little bit more. May 1978, as far as he was concerned, it was full penetration time. And I got up, I was ready to go to college. I had my money put down to go off to college in September, and it was a £5 note, and I decided that he was not doing that to me, no matter what. So I got up, and there was, by this time they got me on a load of medication, right, because I was depressed. At 16 they'd stuck me on loads of stuff, and I was failing exams because I didn't get any sleep, because I didn't want to sleep. I was afraid to close my eyes and go to sleep, so I slept at school on the desk, right. So I had exams. I did my English exam for the 3rd time when they realized I was coming to school hungry and decided to give me breakfast that morning before the exam, and that's when I passed it. My cousin was a head teacher, a blackhead, one of the first blackheads in the country. My head teacher, not knowing this woman was related, told her she was concerned about a black child in the school who obviously had problems at home. My cousin called me to her house and said, "You are ungrateful, they're looking after you, you've got no right telling people that they're doing this to you." So, you know, children take a long time before they speak out. They show all the signs of abuse before they even start speaking out. But there comes a time when they might speak out. And if the time they speak out, nobody's listening, the person tells them to shut up, they call them names, tell them they're ungrateful, whatever, it's going to be a long time before they speak out again. Right? So she told me not to speak out. She was scared of the person I lived with because this was her foster sister as well, years before I became the foster sister and foster child. Yeah? So she was scared to speak out. She told me not to talk about it. I should be grateful that they took me in. Grateful for being kept in England. Grateful for you getting the equivalent of £450 a week to keep me in your house, yet you're not feeding me, you're not clothing me, you're allowing your husband to sexually abuse me, right? You're letting your children beat me up, you're letting them steal my dinner money, you're letting me walk around with newspapers instead of sanitary towels, and I should be grateful for that, right? So in May 1972, I ran away. And you know all these missing children they have in England? Nobody missed me. I was under the care of social services. They did not look for me. The police did not look for me. Nobody cared that I'd gone. Right? So I got a friend to phone up to say where I was. And they said, "Tell Shirley we can't give a fuck." Yeah? But she must have realized that she wasn't going to get any money. So I turned up again. Social worker turned up and said, "Well, when's your last exam?" I said, "Next Tuesday." She says, "Right, as from Tuesday afternoon, you're no longer in care. Hope things work out for you." And I'm standing there saying, "He raped me. And she's like, yeah, as from next Tuesday afternoon, you're no longer in care, you're going to get your own house. He raped me, you're going to go and find somewhere else to live, you're going to... Right? She didn't want to hear, and my record said nothing at all about that. The final record says she came to see me, she told me that I'm going to have to get a job and whatever else. She told me how to go to the employment exchange, she told me this, she told me that. Pack a lie, she didn't tell me anything. Just that she
do this, I'm afraid. I have came up with quite a few occasions raising concerns for my own children to social services, and they will try to turn they'll try to make anything to make conversation to avoid the subject, even to try to place some of the blame upon yourself.
Oh yeah, it was my fault.
Try to sort
She
of...
said it herself. She actually stood downstairs one day at the bottom of the stairs and she shouted, if anybody want to tell me that my husband's interfering with them, they can forget it because they must want it. Yeah? That woman, that's in home, actually sent me to the chemist with a note. It said orthoginal on it. Orthoginal is a permicide. I was under 18. She gave me that note to take to the chemist with the money to buy this cream, which she then put on his dressing table so that he could use it on me, because he wasn't using it on her because she slept downstairs and he slept upstairs, and they very rarely talked to each other. The other two girls that he abused in his house, one was the subject of Jimmy Savile's abuse when she went to St. James's Hospital. I remember her telling me that he'd come in and whatever. So she went in with one thing and ended up staying in there much longer. She got peritonitis and all sorts of stuff while she was in there. She came out of hospital 2 years after her baby was born. She killed her. She killed her child. I met her years later. I recognized her from a scar on her face, and she said she killed her baby because she did not want her to go through what she'd gone through. And what they did to her, the psychiatrist told this because she was abused as a child by her stepfather. Then I remember she was abused in our house. I remember her mother coming to get her out of the house and shouting at everybody. And they sterilized her, put her full-time in the mental health system. Right? The other person he abused in our house went into prostitution. In fact, his daughter was offered some money by one of his friends at one time, and they were making all this fuss about his friend being cheeky, but I know what it was about. So his daughter, this other one, gets sexually abused in our house, get taken out of the house, put in a children's home. She was already being abused by her stepfather. So she goes to a mother and baby home. Social services take her to a mother and baby home, tells me that she wasn't pregnant, although she's in a mother and baby home, and then puts her in another home where they use pin down. But pin down, in these cases, and well, they're not always the same. In this home, pin down was girls pinned down by men who gang raped them and locked them up naked in the room for days on end because they were naughty. Yeah, she got pinned down. She became an international singer and writer. I'm one of the few people who know who she is. But ever so often, it creeps in, she starts getting flashbacks, she starts getting suicidal, and she phones me. And I spend some time with her, and we talk through the issues, and then I leave her, and she goes back to being big-time star. Yeah, and that's only some of it, because just to end, I finally realized that I was sexually abused from I was about 3 years old. It took years of telling myself I was abused in England before I started going further back, peeling off the onion skin and realizing that my uncle sexually abused me, a neighbour sexually abused me, my family knew. My godmother actually tried to protect me, went to my grandfather and said, your son has sexually abused her, your son's interfering with Shirley, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you're crazy, you're old, and you're a foreigner, she came from another island, go away from me. and that's how they carried on abusing us all. And over the years, I've gone to different ones and I've asked them questions because I've had vague recollections. And my uncle Albert actually said he came to England when I was 6, which meant he abused me before I was 6 years old. And he abused his sister, my mother. And I still haven't dealt with all of it, you know. There are still more of them. My cousin died 2 years ago. He abused me. You know, I've had various members of the family, right? Because I was vulnerable. I was born premature, right? So I was there. I was there for their taking. I was premature. I was weak. I wasn't walking or talking. I was on my own quite often, and so they had access to me. And I said to somebody, I'm going to tell them about ice cream. My uncle bought me an ice cream and sat me on his lap. And he's given me this ice cream, and I loved ice cream at that age, and I'm squirming. So my godmother walks across the room. She kept saying, Shirley, what's the matter, Shirley, what's the matter? Lifts me up. I'm 3 years old. And the man is sitting under me with an erect penis. Right? And that is why the ice cream comes in. Ever so often now, I will eat ice cream because I like it, but it isn't because somebody's offering it to me as a bribe or whatever else. Right? And yeah, I've had some horrible experiences. I've had 10 pregnancies in order to get one child. I had one that died after 7 hours, and the other is now 30 odd. And the reason why that happened is because of all the abuse that I got. It affected me physically, mentally, right? And I couldn't carry children as far as medical not well concerned. And I kept telling them, I'm going to do it. And after I had that one, they said, another pregnancy will kill you. So I just thank God that I've got the one. Right? But that's what I've been through. And as a teacher, I've seen it. I've protected our children. I've reported teachers who are still running around abusing people. I've come across a head teacher who's got files following him from one end of the country to the next, but they'd never get rid of him. In fact, he was a blackhead, and he was allowed to go back to Jamaica with a golden handshake. But we're still after him because, you know, we talked earlier about boys and all that. His head teacher and his friend used to sexually abuse boys. And the reason I knew that to begin with was because I worked in mental health and I met their victims before I even met them. Then I met him, and we had one kid in the school called Jason, a really talented guy, and when he went missing, what I heard was, oh, Jason has probably run off to London and he's probably picked up by paedophiles and he's probably selling his bottom and I'm like, hey, a probably is here. And then Jason killed himself. And up to now, we haven't accused them of murder, but that is coming. Right? So I don't care, they hack my mails, even to come here today. All my Yahoo emails for the last few weeks actually disappeared from my account, right? And then they came back over the last few days. My phone's tapped. You phone me, you think I'm busy, but I'm not even on it. I phone you, I think you're busy, but you're not even on it. They're tapping our phones, they're breaking into our homes, they're stealing things. You put it here, you go away, you come back, it's not here. You come back a few days later, it's come back. Yeah? And they make you think you're going mad.
Yeah. That's why I have got all my evidence has been scanned, right?
Yeah.
And it's sitting on about 5 different hard drives, with 3 of them sitting in different.
Yeah. But I say to people, 6 copies, your best friend, your worst enemy, under your pillow in case they burn your house down, you've got another one with your bank. But always have copies of everything. Mm-hmm. Right? Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Shirley. That was really quite something. And it just goes to show
very brave.
that, yeah, we want to hear these testimonies, you know. It's important that people come forward with these testimonies and we can all share and help each other. and that's what we're all about. So thanks again, Shirley. So we've got a very short time left. So can we have any questions if there is any?
Ask how many times you find, I know it's a hard one for you.
How many?
I know it's going to be hard for you,
Yeah.
but many times you reckon you've been sexually abused?
How many times? I've never counted it. I've never counted it because it's been, I've had a lot of abusers because my foster father, and in fact it's something I've said to somebody earlier as well, my foster father knew that I was sexually abused as a child back home, so he just carried on. Because he actually mentioned it at one time. He knew what had happened to me before, so it was only an extension of everything else. Yeah.
We've heard this before, where people who have been abused, maybe in the care system, they move care home, and as soon as they move, they're abused by someone else.
Yeah.
And then they move again, and the same happens again.
Yeah.
And it's not that they've got "abuse me" written in their forehead. It's the information is going ahead of them.
They do that. Childline. I think when you had that talk with when he was here, what was that guy? UK Colour. He said it. You phone up Childline, and the person at the other end, what's your name, little girl? Where are you from? And if that guy is an abuser, he tells his friends, oh, there's Christy, you know, she is 10, she lives in such and such a place, look for her. In prison, they pass on information. You know, guys coming out of prison and they tell them about all the little girls that they've got out there to go and collect and whatever. And teachers, back to teachers, a teacher that we are going to out in the next few days, one of my ex-pupils texted me today to tell me that she's written her book and she's launching it in September. She met him a few days ago and she said, I've written a book. He said, what's it about? And she said, being sexually abused. She watched him in the face and he sort of squirmed and changed the subject. And I said, what you need to tell him now is that he's actually in the book because I'm authorising all sorts of stuff on your behalf as well. But he's sexually abused in a school. There was a ring in Holt School in Birmingham that extended to Fred West in Gloucester, to Jimmy Savile in Yorkshire, to the school that I was in Wigan Hall. I kept looking at the head and thinking, I know you from somewhere, I know your name. When a homeless person gave me his name last week, he said, yes, you know you at such and such a school, did you know? And I said, yes, I did know, that's why he gave me help. Yeah. So we've got a lot of teachers, a lot of head teachers, a lot of them, you know, and we didn't talk about satanic abuse.
Children, I mean, it's obviously there's going to be much.
Oh, exactly.
The head of the Willinghall, Warsaw, a lot of satanic abuse is going around. The Peribar, the Greyhound track, they used to take a lot of girls there to be abused. Morticians, one of the girls who told me she was sexually abused said they used to go to the morgue where they had sex with dead bodies, and every Easter they used to get all these kids together and sexually abuse them because it was part of their ceremony, their Easter opposing to Christian. And so they abused a lot of girls, and this particular one was buried with her baby, and she crawled her way out, but the baby died. But she was fostered by a social worker who then turned out to be one of them and took her back to the others to be abused all the time.
I have done quite a lot of work with William Schnobin. Don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was an ex-Satanist, believe it or not. And he never abused any children, fair enough, right? But he told me that the Satanists like to abuse the children because they believe that defiling a child gives them immortality.
Okay, on that note, we really have run out of time. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
And if you just could give Shirley a round of applause. And also for John, thanks very much for speaking. Much appreciated.